Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about web-based projects and flipped classroom opportunities using Edmodo. Now you can do either one of these with or without Edmodo, but since that's my home base, that's going to be my point of reference. So first of all, I want to talk about what a flipped classroom actually is. So the flipped classroom approach is a new method where instead of having the students do the practice at home and receive the instruction in class, that is flipped around, where students receive the tutorial or the instruction at home in the evening, and they bring that knowledge with them to class, and the teacher works through scenarios where they can test their knowledge. So if you're in a math class, they're trained at home on how to perform the quadratic equation or to find slope that evening, and then in class that day the students work through exercises either individually or as a group that expand on that knowledge, and the teacher can use that as a basis for further instruction in the class as well. So it's not just do the instruction at home, only practice all day long. You can also use it as a springboard for other discussions in class. So the second thing I want to do is give you some practical examples and how I use them in my own classroom. I feel like you can learn a whole lot just by looking at what somebody else has done, and you can relate it to what you currently do, and you can kind of tailor it to fit your needs. So the first thing that I use in kind of a flipped approach is rather traditional. Sometimes I assign readings. Now, not necessarily readings from the textbook. Sometimes these are articles where students have to go home and read, and then we use that as the basis for discussion at the beginning of class before we move on to our topic of the day. They can also be speeches or actual articles from magazines or stuff from the newspaper or even things from the internet. So things that sometimes the readings are meant to enhance on what we're studying, and sometimes they're just meant to create ties. A better example of this would be whenever I assign videos. Sometimes their only homework is to go home and watch a video, which what kid doesn't like to do that? Um, so sometimes the videos are, if you're studying the Battle of Gettysburg, I send them home and they have to watch a video about the Battle of Gettysburg to just have a baseline, because it's a huge battle and every little bit helps. However, sometimes it's a video that is a current event, and we talk about how it affects their world, but then I ask them create ties between the historical information and current day. So they have to find themes, they have to find patterns. So I use the videos in the sense that I am creating some kind of a bond with their prior knowledge and the things that they're receiving currently. So those are really basic things that I use, and I probably use those regularly. Now the last one is a project I want to show you. Now the project that I created is for my 6th grade class, and it's a Religions of Asia project. They study the class is called World Studies. So we study all the regions of the world, and the one that we were on was the Eastern cultures. So they got to make a project on one of the Eastern religions. So Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, or Islam. So let me show you that project. Got it in Edmodo, of course. Now, side note on the project, all of the project elements were taught in a flipped classroom method. So the only thing the students were doing in class was asking questions on what they watched the night before, or they were actually working on their paper. So learning how to make an outline, learning how to make the fact cards, learning how to do any other research paper component was taught at home in the flipped approach, and I made videos. So the first thing I want to show you is their requirements for the project. Now the basis of the project was for them to learn how to use a web tool called Noodle Tools. And I want to show you that website really quick. So Noodle Tools is an all-encompassing website that takes the student through the entire research process prior to writing their paper. So this is what Noodle Tools looks like. And students can share their projects with me. So I have 20 students in my geography class, and every single one of them shared their project with me. I'm not going to show them to you because they all have the students' names and email addresses on them. But this is a test project that I made, kind of to work through my samples and to make my videos. So there's 3 main parts to any research project. You have your works cited, which is where you make your citations. You have your note cards and your outline, which is how you manipulate your research. And if you want, they can actually type their paper in Google Docs, and it's all linked here, so it's one-stop shopping for me. I did not use this because there was some concern about students having their own Google Docs accounts, and since they are 6th grade students, you know, the parent sentiment wins with me, and I just stuck with the works cited and the note card since there was nothing else floating around on the internet. So let's get down to looking at what the actual project components are before I show you around Noodle Tools anymore. So their objectives are here. They need to be able, by the end of the project, to explain the difference between a reliable and an unreliable source, make fact cards by taking notes on your research, show how their thesis statement, or create a thesis statement from their research, produce an outline, write a short research paper with at least 2 main body paragraphs, and create a works cited page. So this takes them through all of the nuts and bolts of the paper. So each day at the beginning, either at the beginning of class, the beginning, so select one of the religions, start conducting your research. I talked about it at the beginning of class, but what I did in class every other day was at the end, I'm like, okay, this is where you're at. This is what you're going to do tonight. This is what your video is going to be on. This is what you need to think about for tomorrow. And we kind of worked about it that way so that all the kids were primed for what they needed to do each night. Now I also broke it down into a timeline. So this timeline, it tells them what homework is due, what they need to complete each day, and where they're going. I mean, it left nothing up to chance. Now, this timeline was proposed based on an agreement that I had with my school with how much time was left before spring break. So I ended up having to alter the timeline a little bit. However, it just meant that along with the videos that I was emailing home every night, I had a revised schedule. And the parents really liked it because they knew exactly what was coming. They could see the progression, they could ask their students, and they could log into Noodle Tools and see what was going on themselves. Now, I provided a basic rubric along with the original handout, but I also included a more specific rubric in here. Rubric. So when I finally started grading, this showed them where all their points were being allocated. So the basic rubric, which was described on the bottom here, so 25% towards research and note cards. Okay, this was the 25% for research and note cards. This is how many points I would give you. This is how many points a student earned. 25% for participation and use of Noodle Tools. You know, and it went all the way through and added up to 100. It made life very simple for me and very simple for the students and parents because they could understand where the points went. Now, let's take a look at some of the other things that I included. So, some of the videos. So one of the first things that we talked about in class was how to judge reliable and unreliable source. I wanted to make this into a video, but as time permitted, I ended up doing it as an in-class project. So it takes them through how to judge an internet website, and it basically broke it down into what I ended up calling the CARS method. And this is what the CARS method looks like. They have to judge the website on 4 things: credibility, accuracy, reasonableness, and support. And they need to ask themselves these questions as they go through a website. It really helped them to focus, and if they had the urge to raise their hand and go, is this a good website? Can I use this? Would always refer them back to this, and they could open it up on Edmodo and go, okay, I don't think so. Or yes, I think this is reliable. Now, they left them with an understanding that not every single one of these questions is going to be able to be answered. However, if there's an overwhelming hesitation with any of these questions, like, does the information seem reliable? Does it seem to be error-free? If you can't answer that, or if you really feel like no, then there's no reason to look for an editor, because if your gut says no, it's probably not accurate anyway. So it really helped them to focus on the research. Now the next thing was they had a website launch pad for this project. Now the website launch pad is something that I put together, and it's a way for them to start their research without feeling overwhelmed. So it's just a short list of websites that I deemed credible, and students are required to find at least one additional source outside of these for the purpose of their research. Now, if you're doing Islam, of course, you're going to have to probably find more than just one, but some of the other ones, it just made life a little bit easier. So, and it made them have a lot less anxiety, and it just gave them a place to start so they didn't spend the first 15 minutes of class just goofing around on the internet. So then each night, or not each night, but each night there was a video. They were reminded on the Edmodo homepage of which one to watch, and they could watch them straight from here. So you just click on it, it opens it in a new window, or it's supposed to. They can all I would also provide the link and they could go straight to YouTube, but everything is here and archived. So how to form a thesis statement. There was also a recap on the note card. So some students I found, as they were working, they weren't creating the note cards of the quality that I thought they should be. So I had a recap on how to take the note card from the quote in your source onto a well paraphrased note card. Now, in the end of the project, they had a performance review. Then a performance review based on what kinds of things they were to look for, how they felt they worked in the lab, things like that. Did they get help from anybody? But then the final thing that I was really interested in is their project evaluation. Now, the project evaluation is something that would help me critique the project for the next year. So it's something like, did they have a good learning experience? Did it keep my interest? And it's all kinds of things that as a teacher, I might not necessarily be able to tell right off the bat. And I really wanted to judge, A, was this a good project? And B, was Noodle Tools something I wanted to continue using? Because that was the main focus of this project, was to test out Noodle Tools. They're going to have to do a research paper anyway, but it was whether or not Noodle Tools is beneficial. So let's go back to Noodle Tools for just a second. So talking about all these note cards, this is what they look like. So for each piece of information a student finds, you essentially make a note card. So the old school way is you actually have an index card, and there's a format that you use to put your information on the note card. Well, this takes them through where you have to have a direct quotation, which is literally copy and paste. They're required to paraphrase or summarize the information that they pasted so that there is no plagiarism. I encourage them to use sentences so they could copy and paste them into their paper, so the sentences were already their own. And then I could come into every single note card. Now, since this is mine, it looks slightly different. I could correct or critique every single note card, and I did for the first, I think, 20. They're required to have 30. So that students could have my feedback on every note card, and I didn't have to be there. It's something that I could do at home. Now, they could before they do their outline, they could put the note cards into piles. So this is an example of a pile. What they would do is they would move these around on the tabletop and put them into groups. And once they think the group is set, they just have to lay the piles on top of one another, name the pile, and they can add cards to it as they go. Now this helps them when they get to their outline, which is done over here, because then they can open up the pile and view what is in them and type out their subject lists. And when they're finished with their outline, it's just print and it goes. Now, the outline's really cool. I'm just going to type some things in here. Because you can move things around really easily. So let's say I want this topic to go as topic A. All I have to do is click on it, drag it, or click on it and move up, and it moves everything along with it. So no more of those days of having this Word document that gets funky formatting or anything like that. Noodle Tools really helped out in that regard. So this is a basic overview of the project. It's both flipped and web-based, so I hope you found some things that you can use. Please feel free to post any questions or thoughts on the discussion board. We will talk about this next time.